Let's get going. Here's my clicker. So, my name is Mike Foley. I work in the vSphere Tech Marketing Group at VMware.
I'm Edward Hledkia. I'm a Principal Analyst at TVP Strategy.
Okay, we are going to be talking about secure operations for VMware vSphere with VMware vRealize Log Insight. As mentioned, I'm not on the Log Insight team. I'm on the vSphere team. One of the things I pushed very, very hard for and got into vSphere 6.5 is much, much better logging. And this whole session started when Edward and I participate on his podcast on security, on virtualization security. We were discussing all of the really cool logging that comes out of vSphere and how to take advantage of it in a security context. So, the disclaimer, I'm sure you've already read this about 400 times already this week.
You can read it again. You can read it again. We will go back if anybody's missed it.
No,
we're
okay.
good. We're good.
The introduction, we'll talk about why we did this. We'll talk about users, shell commands, RBAC changes, reconfiguration events, stump the chump, and Edward's going to show you something really cool at the end, and then we'll have a Q&A. For the Q&A, we would ask that you come up to the lights. I'm pointing at the lights. Up to the microphones and ask the questions. Make it a lot easier. This session is being recorded, so we want to make sure that we get your question recorded as well.
And during Stump to Chump, you should also go up to the mics, please.
Yep. So, the why. Edward has his whys, I have my whys. So my whys are, IT needs have changed. IT needs more information because guess what? Security found you, right? Security is now on just about everyone's radar.
Not just about. It is on everybody's radar.
No, there are a few who...
Really? There's some people under rocks?
There are.
Okay.
There are. Security needs more information, and getting that information, if it is really, really hard to get, that then goes from a security discussion to a political discussion. Because if you have to onboard more people to provide the security team more stuff, then that's no longer a technological question, that's now a business discussion. If you've ever read the Phoenix Project, you'd understand that completely.
And if you haven't, I really suggest you read it. It's a real quick read.
One of the big downsides, however, is the tools. Existing tools have been inadequate. Quite frankly, logging sucks. Really, really bad. And if the logs suck, then the things that receive the logs, like the security incident and event management products, like your ARC sites and your login sites and so forth, if you put in crap, you get crap. So, Edward's going to talk about why did we do this?
Well, I'm going to reiterate, the existing tools are basically inadequate. No SIEM that I've ever seen for security actually understands the virtualization environment at any depth. When they try to do something with it, they actually look at the wrong data. They may look at auth data, but for a subsystem no one ever uses. So it's like giving you bad information. So bad information comes in, and you'll get bad information to make these security decisions off of. They are just horrible. And the logs, when vSpheres first started, were just atrocious. They were just horrible.
I'm going to show an example.
Yes, we have an example of that. But they were, even at that example, that's better than what they were when they first started.
Yes.
They've gotten better, believe me. And that's been a lot of pushing. I've actually complained about this every year. The also thing is that the logs are really difficult to read.
You can't, how many people go through the vSphere logs and try to read them? They're a good book, right? You can understand them?
It got better in 6.5.
Well, they're a better book. But you have to have a background in almost like Linux kernel engineering to understand some of these logs early on. You still have to have that. That's not what this is about. Finding people that understand that is an expensive task. So we want to take that complexity out of the picture. I would need to do that. The other thing is that most people don't follow best practices. A lot of people don't even know what the best practices are for securing your environment. So I wanted to bring up a visibility so people can say, hey, I'm doing this right. Is this really the right way to do it? The other thing is that we need a bridge. Early on, we've always had this battle between security and virtualization. Security was out of the picture because virtualization came in a different way.
Yep.
Security didn't grab onto that and march with them. They basically said, no, you can't do that. How many people have been faced with that? Not many of you? This is good.
They must be all security people.
They're all security people, yeah. But security ops and the virtualization administrators are not in sync. So the whole idea behind doing this SOC was actually bringing virtualization administrators. They set dashboards that can share with their ops team and share with the security team and all talk about a common problem and have a common way of looking at things. So it's basically giving you that discussion.
So I'm going to talk just briefly about the new logging that's in vSphere 6.5. How many here are using 6.5? Excellent. How many of you are still on like 4.0? I know this, I've already met a couple of people this week. How about 5.5? How many are planning to get off of 5.5 and move directly to 6.5 in the next few months? Okay, I'll take that. Better than none. Okay. So we really wanted to transform logging in 6.5. If you look at logging pre-6.5, logs were primarily there for GSS troubleshooting, right? They weren't really there for auditing. They weren't really there for security operations. That's what I meant by they sucked. The audience for logging was not you, and it was certainly not the security person. In 6.5, we included vCenter events, and we started making the logs a lot better. Going forward, they will get even better. I can't... Yeah. Yeah, all of the work we did in preparation for this session resulted in multiple bug reports to improve the logs even better. So if you look at logging in the 5.x and 6.0 timeframe, if I make a change to a VM, I reconfigure the VM, I get VM was reconfigured by Mike Foley. Okay, what did I do? Did I move that VM from the sensitive network to the unsensitive network? Or the PCI network to the non-PCI network, now taking that VM out of scope? Or did I just attach an ISO file? Or did I add 2 gig of memory? Mike, what did you do? That's not effective when you start thinking of doing things at scale. In 6.5, we changed that. We added a whole lot more information to the logs. So now not only do I get Mike reconfigured the VM, but oh look, he made this hardware change and moved and deleted a network adapter off of that VM. That level of information I can now do something with. That's what I like to call actionable logging. So now I can pump that type of information into Log Insight, and now rather than combing through logs, I can now visualize logs. I could have a little gadget in Log Insight that shows me how many VMs have had a network adapter removed over the past 30 days. That's a lot easier to visualize than it is to comb through logs. So this whole session is going to be very demo heavy. We have backup videos in case the network connection goes down, but Edward's going to do most of these demos live, and I'm going to let him run with that. Yeah. He brought the demos, I brought the stickers.
So, yeah, how many can get one of these nice sticker dashboards? So what we did here, this is actually a small virtual environment running vSphere 6.5. Originally it was running 6.5B, and now I upgraded to U1 just because
the demo gods are not smiling on you.
Okay. Yeah. And yes, I do use Verizon. So what I built is a small environment that has 3 vCenter servers. It's running vSAN, just because I have no other storage for it. Excuse me a second. Always look at your server.
Do we go to?
I think we're going to have to. The LTE just dropped.
Yep. Okay.
We're going to this.
So I'll let you go ahead and drive.
We'll go back. Sorry about that. As you know, everyone's failure. So this is a small environment. It's only 3 nodes, but whether it's 3 nodes or 300 nodes, it really makes no difference. Okay? When you log into a login site, you get this wonderful dashboard. This is the standard general dashboard for vSphere. What we've done is added a host of new dashboards. I'm going to show you a small video. We call it the security operations. Oops. And of course, we're closing that now. Security operations is a bunch of other things. It's not just, hey, I want to look at config changes. Originally, it started as just doing I originally started with activity. I wanted to know who did what, when, where, and how. So as you can see here, this is a set of dashboards that tell me who did what, when, and where. Basically, who's logged into my system. If I can find out who's logged into my system, I can find out if administrators are doing work. We have this nice little vCenter administrator actions and vSphere root actions. It should be ESXi root actions, my apologies.
Yep.
It's not vSphere, it's ESXi. What we're trying to do is say, hey, the best practices for virtualization security are never to log in as the administrator and never to log in as root. Those are great glass options. If you have to, you should, but I shouldn't get worried about that. So when we go through what we did here, let's go forward, is the original, we try and find out who did what. Who's logged in? So you can see I got login site logged in. I have VPXT extension, which is actually SSO, just in case you know. I have security sites, VMA, NSX, a bunch of stuff. And I have the individual hosts are doing stuff as well, right? So what I'm doing is trying to track through who's doing what through the entire environment. So this is actually login and logout. vSphere gives you a login and a logout. ESXi gives you a login and a logout. So actually I can track all the way through who's doing what. So if I'm doing a vCenter action, is that an action on ESXi? That's actually important to know. The real issue is then what happens is when you start to thinking about that. Do you know on the ESXi node, if you have 3 users, three administrators all doing the same action or doing different actions, which one wins? Well, I can tell you which one wins. That's the goal. I can tell you which one on the server is doing it. Because the logs will improve to include at the ESXi level the vCenter user that's actually doing the action. So now I know who finally won. And that's new. That wasn't there before. It came out as 6.0.
6.0, yep. So the next demo we're going to talk about are shell commands. And this is one of those times where we have in ESXi the SSH shell disabled by default. You can log into the console shell. But logging into the ESXi shell should be a break glass scenario. You should not be doing daily system management in the ESXi shell. That's what things like PowerShell are for, right? That allows you to provide a lot better level of consistency rather than making a change in 3,000 ESX hosts by logging into 3,000 ESX hosts. It makes far more sense to write a PowerShell script with a for each loop that does that, because then you can go back and test that. So when people are logging into the shell and running commands, you probably want to know what they're doing. ESX sends all shell commands out via syslog, and Edward is going to show you how he captures that and then alerts on some of the commands that are coming through.
Okay, so what we've done here is it's actually done through a simple dashboard that I've done. So what we've done is, it says I can do changes. So this is actually a script. You guys can get a little script if you want to, that basically runs through and just does a lot of things. So this is constantly happening every 30 minutes, which is kind of cool. I can just produce a lot of data. So what we've done here is, look, I know some configuration tasks are happening. I know that I'm enabling and disabling SSH. This needs someone real fast. I need to know that. Here is the number of commands that are being run, and over here is the exact list of commands that are being run. This is randomized to look at really important stuff, like someone's trying to get to your password file. So there's a cat, that's your password. You see that, that would be that, right? I would not want to see that. Looking at my DNS is not a good story if someone's trying to troll my DNS.
Right.
So the idea is I'm exposing this here. So when you have one dashboard, it will show you, it's actually saying there's 0 shell commands. These aren't actually direct shell commands, these are all over SSH. And the way you can tell in this dashboard is there is a single quote at the end. If it was a regular shell command, the single quote would be here. And that's because of the way the parsing works, more than anything else, but it's kind of nice to see. So now I have a visibility of exactly what's happening in a shell level or an SSH level. You've never been able to see this before, and when you come through a million lines of log files, my logs are huge. Do you imagine 400 servers instead of just 3? This would be painful at best. And as a security guy, one of the rules is actually said, don't allow SSH access. Well, now I know SSH access. It's been enabled and disabled. I know what's happening. And because I'm tracking users, I know who's good. I just go to the other dashboard and start looking at it. Okay? All this is done. I'm going to show you this. Okay. This is actually the interactive analysis of this. So it's actually looking at, those 3 commands are showing up all the time. Those are actually 3 I never want to see. Sorry, folks. If you see these, there's something really going on. But what it's doing is, turn that back down. These are the actual logs that you see for each one of them. I'm going to go that up to that trouble. I'm sure you do. There we go. Oops, did it too far now. User root is running a command. Again, really is one of those things no one should be doing this for anything. But remember, VSXi, every user on there is actually root.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, if you think of a single user Linux environment, in order to log into ESXi, you have to have the full administrator role in the vSphere API at the host. And when you log in, it's not Edward and Mike, it's actually root as Edward or Mike. All right, so anyone who gets login permissions into ESXi means they are root. They can do anything on that host.
Why we have as a best practice, you never log in. It's break glass to go to that console. You're using SSH with the direct shell. That's a break glass situation.
Yeah, and if you have 40 admins that are using a shared root password, and you don't have something like what Edward just showed you, you have no idea what they're doing.
Exactly. Now, I will let you know, in the last 3 years of using vSphere, I've logged in root maybe twice.
in 10
Yeah.
years. And they were all because it was catastrophic failure. There was no way to fix it. One of them was vCenter got on. It's hard to start up vCenter when you think you don't have vCenter around. So you have to go in and fix start up again. So those are the type of break classes like.
Yeah, what I hear all the time from customers when I say, why do all 40 of your admins have essentially root access into all of the ESX services? Well, that's the way we've always done it. No. So the next thing we're going to talk about is role-based access control and how these things change and how Edward's going to track some of that in his live demo.
Okay, so we go back to the dashboards, and we go to permissions. So permission changes right here. These permission changes, what we're looking at is over inside the script, what it's doing is actually adding permissions and removing permissions. I have an alert in here if it ever changes the administrator privilege. If someone becomes an administrator, I want to know, right? If someone removes an administrator, I also want to know. So the idea here is now bringing out visibility on what's happening. So I got some permission changes, I got a delete in here, I got an update, and I got an edit. So if someone's deleting a permission for a user, that could be a big deal. It's like, you no longer have access to do everything I'm telling you I do, right? That would be bad. If I'm adding a permission, that could also be bad. It could be an internal guy who just got let go. What company was that?
Oh gosh, yeah. There was some company where they were doing everything on a cloud vendor, and they did not enable two-factor auth into the cloud management interface. Someone got the password compromised, and then deleted their administrators and deleted all their backups and completely wiped out a company.
Yeah, and actually there's another one with a vSphere environment where a guy was literally let go of the company. He went to the local Wi-Fi hotspot in a restaurant, like a fast food chain, logged back in and started deleting VMs, critical VMs, like DNS, AD, simple. And he got away with it. They actually installed it. Because if I start a PowerShell script to delete stuff, it's going to happen in 30 seconds. But he had to actually add himself as administrator again. But he didn't know how to do it. So he had the credentials to get in, and he had the credentials to go further. So if someone's deleting something, I don't want to know they're deleting it. And I want to double check, is that an HR event? Yeah, you don't know that.
So while what you're seeing here may not have stopped that, that would have generated a whole bunch of forensic evidence that would have put him into legal jeopardy in a big way.
Big, not bigger than you want. Don't do it. So the other thing is we broke it out by what's happening. This is group by user events. This is add, update, and delete. And then we added this one recently because I recently was playing around with NSX. Those people use NSX. We're now tracking the hard back inside of NSX. If I expanded this to the full-time view, for the start, we would actually see me adding a my user as an administrator inside of NSX. That's also something important to know. This is not normally part of the NSX content path or NSX.
So I think you can really start to see the benefit of the work that Edward's done to create this security operations content pack for Log Insight. You can now start to get a real good visual interpretation of what is going on in your environment. Sure, if it's just you and one other guy who are managing 3 or 4 ESX hosts and in a vCenter, this might not be as useful. It might be more interesting. But if you are running an IT organization with a lot of people, with a lot of permissions, a lot of people logging into vCenter, and you want to find out just what's going on, you can really start to discover not only security concerns, but also IT operations concerns. If you're creating new VMs on a regular basis and then going back and modifying those VMs, maybe that's a way to then, you can now visually see that modification going on and now start to think of how can I create those VMs correctly the first time and remove that possibility of further misconfigurations, because misconfiguration is probably your biggest threat to security in this environment. So what else are you going to demo?
Well, I'm going to show you the configuration of that. This particular script is going on in the folder. So we've got VM configuration changes. So what we're looking at is who's doing the changes. I really want to know, if someone's changing my environment, I want to know who. Who did what, when, where, and how, right? But why I have to figure out, that's what the forensic scientist is for. But this one gives me this VMA user, which is actually, I built a VMA of myself. It's a Linux machine with PowerShell and PowerXS and VCLI and all that stuff built into it. And I have a couple of users on it. But the goal of this is to say, okay, each action taken by anything, whether it's a script, whether it's a user, should be unique ID. If I see a lot of stuff happening as root or administrator, I can't tell who did what. So everybody, the best practice is to have one user for everything. Like one user for VMA, one user for vRealize, so you need, everybody needs their own username. That way I can track it. This VMA is doing everything, and it's making a bunch of config hardware changes. And over time, you can do a bunch of things, modifying the changes, and there's 18 of them that are happening all the time. That's a lot of changes for just one VM.
This is the VM that's being changed right there. This is a block out by, if you had more than one VM, it'll just list it out, multiples. But he's also deleting devices. So what we're doing here is in the script, we're adding devices, we're modifying, adding, and then we're turning around and deleting them. The modification, the reason why, this is actually one of those SRs we came up with.
Yep.
The way when you look at this data, and I'm going to show it to you in this form.
Well, while you're doing that, let me just bring up the point around deleting of VMs. You could go through the logs and check and see who's deleted VMs and when they've deleted them, or you can look at the graphic and go, why is someone deleting VMs at 4 in the morning on a Sunday morning? Why is Bob doing that? What the hell's Bob doing? He added and deleted VMs. You can see that visually rather than going through logs by hand. Makes it a lot easier to discover things going on in your environment.
So what we have here is the actual log. So you can see they're really in depth. I can look at any one of these pieces and pick it up. Now, this is like DV port 46. I mean, I got a port group for on a distributed virtual switch. I know which virtual switch it is. So if someone's moving something from one VM, from one switch to another, by adding in a network adapter, I'll know that. That's actually pretty important because most VMs should not be multi-homed, right? That's like immediate attack zone. But what happens with the logs, you can't pick up inside a log insight, and this is one of the SRs we opened, is that each one of these, I can only see one. So when I say config hardware, I see the first one and that's it. So when I did modified and add, I have to see modified, then the line, then add, then the line, and so forth. That's the way the log insight works. That's one of the SRs we opened. I would love to see this as a multi-line thing instead of a single line. This is like one single blob of data. It becomes harder to parse. But it is parsable if you know what you're doing and they fix the logs. So we're going to go to, did I hit the right one? Stump the Chump. What do you guys want to know?
Yeah, what sort of information would you like to see coming out of your environment? And we'll see if Edward's stuff can find some of that. Raise a hand, yell it out. Good. So the question is, where are the logs retained and where are the storage requirements? One of the things you really don't want to do is retain logs on vCenter. vCenter is not a log retention device. So you want to send your logs to something else, whether that's VMware Log Insight, ArcSight, Splunk, whatever, or even an open source syslog tool. That is where you're going to get your benefit. Trying to go through logs in vCenter is going to take you forever and a day. Sending those logs to Log Insight, you can find information in seconds. If you don't already know, if you already have vCenter, you can download Log Insight, put in your vCenter key, and you get 25 free OSIs, they call them, essentially sources of syslog senders that you can send into Log Insight. You won't be able to install Edwards Content Pack because third-party content packs aren't allowed in that licensed version. But you can try out Log Insight and start coming up with some interesting queries. And then if you say, well, that's something I really want to do more, and I definitely want to use Edwards Content Pack, then you just go to VMware, get a license, apply the license, and all of the other stuff is enabled.
So when you install vRealize Log Insight, we'll get to you, sir. When you install vRealize Log Insight, it actually has special things that you can do to hook up vCenter and an ESXi. So you would go and say connect to vCenter, and it actually will redirect the logs to vCenter, from vCenter to Log Insight. And for ESXi, there's another one that'll do that, and it'll actually go through all the ESXi nodes that it has access to and say redirect it to Log Insight. One node, I'm using one Log Insight node. You can cluster as many as you need together to get the storage in performance, in the performance you need in the full version. And you can put as much data behind as you want. And the one I use in my production environment, I actually back up my logs to an NFS file share. So I'm actually sending from Log Insight en masse those things that are rolling out of date to NFS for retention. And my Log Insight environment is growing quite a bit.
It has a big giant FIFO buffer that everything coming in over time at specific size then can become archived. But those are really questions specifically for Log Insight. So if you just kind of, based on what you've heard so far, maybe rephrase the question, see if that. Yes.
Yes, up to a certain amount of, as I said, it's a FIFO, so you want to switch it from there to go to, you offload them every so often.
Yep.
Along those lines of configuration, for your vCenter logs to make it into vRealize or Log Insight, is the syslog output from the vCenter application good enough, or do you need to have an agent on an underlying DMCA?
No.
No, the agent is not allowed.
Yeah, we don't support the installation of third-party agents on VCSA. You just in 6.5, you just set up syslog output and off you go.
Yeah. You log into 5480, VIMA or whatever it's called.
VAMI.
VAMI. You log into the VAMI, set up syslog to point to your vRealize Log Insight. You also have to hook up Log Insight to vCenter to get the events. There's two different data streams there. Yes.
The question 4.3. The question is?
The question is what version of Log Insight is my content pack work on? 4.3 and higher. Yes. The question was, can you build a log scrubber into this so that when it's exported to VMware or any third party, that it will be scrubbed? Log Insight has the capability of sending your data anywhere you want via syslog. It'll forward it to anything. So you could forward it to a VM that scrubs all the data, stores it, and then forwards it up to where it needs to be. So if you have a scrubber, yes. There's not one built in. Now I've done this. It's not that difficult.
So Edward, let's talk about some of these actions. I'll do the stump the chump. I'll try to stump you with some of these.
Okay.
Let's show VM encryption actions. That's one of the new features of 6.5 is the ability to encrypt virtual machines. I'm doing a session later this afternoon on VM encryption and vSAN encryption, and I hope you'd all come to that. And we're going to show security. When you say the word encryption, they kind of get a little squirrely, and they'll want to know just what is going on.
So Mike, it's already done.
I'm going to let Edward show you.
So if we go off and I enable encryption on vSphere, which actually I need to go and log in again to do it, of course. We have a demo of this actually enables it and shows it and so forth. Let me see, can I go back in time instead of doing that? Let me go back in time, there we go. So all this stuff allows you to go back as much time as you need to look at things. Log Insight's only going to show you things of the time frame you've given it. If you say you only want to look at data every 5 minutes, that's all it's going to show you. If you want to look at 1 hour, that's all it's going to show you. So let's do a custom time range here. That seems to be about right. Redo it. Did I do that? Hit the button, refresh, there we go. So this is a dashboard that here is a bunch of events that are actually looking at secure boot. Secure boot is a cryptography event. It's actually saying, is this UEFI have secure boot enabled, which is a part of Windows 10 these days. So if you're using Windows 10 or 2016, I believe, you can enable secure boot on your Windows machines. As a matter of fact, this is required by certain national regulatory requirements and other security standards. When you do that, I would love to know if that's being enabled or even disabled, right? Secure boot's being disabled, I want to know. So what this is doing is saying it's all enabled. So what's happening is this is scanning a Windows 10 VM and looking for whether or not secure boot is enabled. And I'll show you how I'm doing that in a second. This other one is actually going through the logs and saying, hey, did I encrypt or decrypt a VM? I need to know that as well. That's the cryptography bit. So how we do the secure boot one is a little bit different. I'm going to go back to an hour view here.
Do the encryption first.
Yeah, okay. Well, the encryption one, as Mike says I should do first, which I will do. I need that custom time range because actually doing it is going to be a little time consuming.
Right.
So what happens here is when I get this, I didn't hit the button again. Here we go. My finger is not hard enough.
You need a stylus.
I need a stylus, yes. So what's happening here is example ELH, example is my domain, I'm ELH, did an encrypt, and then he also did a decrypt. They actually happen fairly close to each other. So if I was actually looking at this particular log, I built a new query that is sock vc crypto. Love my name. That's looking for encrypt and decrypt. So you can build a query of your own that says, okay, I want to look for encrypt and decrypt. It actually has a whole bunch of stuff in front of it to make sure I'm just not getting generic encrypt decrypt. It's actually doing it on this particular VMs. So it's actually, if you see everything that is in gold here, it's actually saying I need a cryptographic operation. If I have that in my query, that's what I'm triggering on. It's also looking at here for VPXD. VPXD is actually vCenter.
Right. So when you see this sort of stuff going on, this means when your auditor comes in and says, who's been doing all the encryption and decryption, and I want to make sure that that name aligns with the people who have those permissions in vCenter, you'll be able to show, look, Edward made all of these encryption and decryption operations. Very, very easy to find, also very, very easy to visualize.
Yep. Now, secure boot. Anybody have a secure boot requirement?
You will.
You will. 6.5U1 has it.
6.5 has secure boot for virtual machines.
6.5, and it's been improved in 6.5U1, I believe.
I don't think so.
It's still there.
It's still there.
This one was a little more difficult. Secure boot information is actually not in the logs. I looked, I couldn't find it. Mike looked, he couldn't find it. So in this particular one, let me get there. I had to build a different tool so that VMA, and as you can see, it has SOC right there. This VMA, this service that I wrote, is actually going through each VM that is a Windows 10 VM, or 2016, finding it, and then querying the status of Secure Boot from the actual API.
So this is a tool that you've built to enrich the information going into LogInsight.
Exactly.
And enrich the information that is showing up in your security dashboard.
Exactly.
So what it's actually doing is, sometimes you don't get enough information from logs. Edward's going in, he has his tool that says, okay, I'm going to run this query, pull this information, and then I'm going to send that to LogInsight as well so that I can query on that.
And I'm querying, that's exactly what's happening. So I wrote this little tool, just queried out of the API, secure boot status for Windows 10 VMs and 2016 VMs only. Anything else I don't care about. And send it back in with the tag of SOC, so I know it's coming from me, because this is actually kind of important. And then I look for whether or not it's enabled or disabled. Actually, it's kind of funny. It's like we were talking about this early on. It's like, should we give enabled or disabled or both? Mike was saying, just give it to me if it's disabled. And I'm saying, you know what? I want to know if it's enabled or disabled or changed. If it's changed, I kind of want to know. I want to know by who and when. So that's why you need this information. So this is actually a tool I wrote. It was very, very simple if you know the SDK at all. But it actually just made a single query, got it, and went. PowerShell did this, by the way. It was very, very simple in PowerShell.
Yep.
And then I just ran a syslog command on my Linux box and say, hey, send this back to vRealize. Now I have it available for my scans.
So you have this cluster dashboard. What's that all about?
Yeah, internal versus external. You have, and that's kind of what I was talking about. There's internal logs and there's external enhancements to those logs that you need to look at, and that's what we were talking about there. We already showed that off.
Okay.
But the other thing is that when you start talking about the scale of changes that may be happening, you need something, you need a way to visualize it. In the past, I used to be able to go through every log, figure out what was happening, and I was happy. I mean, I was one of those gearheads that just went through logs for fun, right?
That's pretty sad.
It really is. But I started doing this before tools like this existed. Now I can go through all the logs, make a simple query, and get immense amounts of data, but it's what I'm looking for instead of just everything. So when you start talking about scale of systems, I mean, how many people have 100 ESXi hosts? 1,000? Anybody? 10,000? 3? 10?
Those guys don't raise their hands.
Those guys don't raise their hands. When you start talking about 100 ESXi hosts, are you going to go and try to figure out what's happening on each of those hosts individually? That's insane. I know people that do it. That's like a full-time job just to do that. And you take so much time doing that. So visualizing what's happening inside your environment from a security perspective gives you that who did what, when, where, and how.
Right.
Was there anything else you wanted to see? I can easily build a new dashboard. Why don't we do that?
Sure.
What do you guys want to see? Anybody?
What do we want to build a dashboard on?
I don't know. I've got a lot of them in here.
What would you like to see coming out of a VM?
Yeah.
Good.
For NSX microsegmentation, I want to see who wrote a rule and what they wrote.
Since I did not install the microsegmentation pieces on here, I cannot get that information for you. However, it's actually in some of the content pack from NSX as well. And it's actually possible to get that. I actually have one that, let me go back here.
Yeah, because our session was primarily focused on vSphere and not NSX, that's kind of why we didn't.
So under permissions, if I extend the permissions, and actually this may or may not take forever.
Sorry, do you have any other products of content pack, like say vRealize automation?
I'm sorry, speak directly into the microphone. Directly into the microphone.
Yeah, it means do you have other content pack, like say
other content packs?
VRA, vRealize automation.
Yeah, if you look on the LogInsight website, or actually in LogInsight itself, there's links to a whole content pack marketplace.
And there is one for VRA.
And there is one for VRA.
Matter of fact, there's
We're
two.
focusing primarily on the one that Edward wrote himself and showing you how to get that information out of vSphere to really visualize what's going on within your infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
So here is the one I did do for our NSX for RBAC changes, and it's really just gathering the same data for the gentleman was looking for who's changed anything for DFW. So what this was doing was looking at who created the rules. So I actually logged in originally as the NSX user that I assigned to NSX, then had to create my user as the administrator so I could do further stuff. So the only thing I set up here was an ESG, and I didn't put many rules in, but you can see that you can get the data as well. It all goes there. Once you send NSX to Login Site, its whole syslog is available to you. So all that change information is there. It's limited, folks, unfortunately.
Any other questions? Please come to the microphone and ask. Sorry.
How about FIPS compliancy?
FIPS compliance?
Yeah, for the login site side. FIPS 140.2.
You'd have to ask the login site guys because we're not on the login site team. What I can say is FIPS compliance for vSphere is one of those things that's on the roadmap.
Okay, so for login site then, if somebody changed a third-party key, they switch the key out, basically the certificate out, you can actually capture that as far as the certificate changed?
If you are logging Login Site's information itself, yes.
Right. Okay.
If you are logging if it gets logged to the log files, which a lot of certificate change stuff does, you will notice that in the logs. You can build something around that. I didn't change any certs, so it's not something I can search for easily. It's just all the default certs right now.
And Login Site also has a number of agents for those types of applications that don't have the ability to output natively to syslog. You can install their agent. If you have some sort of funky application that outputs stuff to just log files, and it will parse all the log files and send them all to Login Site, and then you can create all sorts of custom queries based on that.
So if you had a Tomcat server running to its own log files running on Windows, which it doesn't use the event log, you can actually install, and actually do this, install the Login Site agent, set it up to get that from that particular directory, it'll just grab it all, and you'll see those queries. You can query on that information as well.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Yep. Go ahead.
Yes.
The demoed security operation dashboard looks like really cool, but it seems like it is only focusing on the vSphere part. But for the enterprise user, we do have other VMware products like VRA, VROps, VRO, VRB, SRM, everything.
Yes.
So we hope we can have a total security template to help us to filtering all the security information, not just for vSphere.
Well, remember, he did this. He does not work for VMware.
I'm an independent.
He's a community. He's a community member, so he built this. Login Site already has lots of content packs. They do have a security content pack for vSphere, and then they have content packs for other products within the VMware portfolio. They do have other content packs,
but that content packs collect all the log, not just only focus for this kind of security information.
I understand, and that's a feedback that you should be giving the Login Site team.
Actually, thank you for that feedback, because I do use all those tools.
Maybe you can spend some time to create an extra content pack for the users.
This is a work in progress. If you go to my GitHub repository, it is available there. And I keep on adding more and more and more. And actually adding in those is something I want to do as well.
Perfect. Thanks.
I agree with you. What we've added in, a lot of what this is are the things that are missing from a security perspective from the content packs that already exist from VMware. That's why it's kind of a gap. Okay?
Come on down. You're the next contestant.
On The Price is Right.
Yeah.
Hi,
okay.
Yogita.
Hey. I work on the Login Site team, so I would like to talk to her about her enhancement request that she has for Login.
Okay.
And the Login Site team is very responsive, just so you know. I have sent them tons of questions.
So if you have those questions,
I'm happy to chat with you, including you for the VRA content pack question that you have.
But for who did what, when, where, and how, for forensics, for security, those are things I'm looking at adding in. They will happen over time. It's just I have to do this on my off hours, unfortunately.
So is anyone here, I'm trying to see the people because the lights are right in my eyes.
Yeah, they are.
Is anyone here classified as a security person? Or are you mostly IT administrators who are under pressure by security?
Okay, security people, raise your hand. I know you can't tell me, right?
IT administrators?
IT ops or IT admin?
IT administrators who want to get the security people out of their office? Yeah.
Okay. The last thing we want to show you is something really special. This isn't, that didn't hit the right button. This is an add-on bundle that I put together really, and it's called Secure ESX. Now, don't get hung up on the name. This is a very old tool that I wrote like for ESX 2.5. It has changed every release. I called it Secure ESX early on. I just kept the name. So it doesn't mean just
ESX.
ESX. It's ESX and ESXi and vCenter and pretty much the whole thing. What my tool does is reads through the security guide. What do they call it? Not the hardening.
It's no longer called the hardening guide.
The security configuration guide for vSphere.
I'm the guy who writes that.
Yes, Mike Saruns writes. I give feedback to Mike all the time for this.
Yeah.
So what we did is it works with some of the hardening guides for 5560, but it also works with the security configuration guide. I take that file directly, parse it, and automatically create a tool that does an audit. And it's using custom, not custom stuff, it's actually writing out XCCDF. And for those people that know what that is, that's the extensible
You wrote it.
Yeah, configuration, content, description, language. And then it uses SCAP, which is a security content automation protocol.
Yeah.
Which is actually really, if
You
you're
can
in
tell the U.S. government made all these.
Yes,
things.
these were all done by MITRE and the U.S. government. They all got together and said, we need the most complex acronyms known to man. But it's actually standard. These are just using standards. So I'm writing out a standard, I'm using a standard tool to run an audit. So this is an add-on I did, just like I did for the SOC add-on for Secure Boot, but this one's a little bit more different. We call it Secure ESX.
You're not up on the screen.
Well, let's put that back while this thing waits. So I'm going to go right there. In the GitHub repository, this exists. The problem is the security team often throws over the security configuration guide and says, here it is, do it. Problem is, inside the security configuration guide are 3 distinctly different profiles.
Yep. Risk profile 1, risk profile 2, risk profile 3. Risk profile 1 is the profile for the most paranoid people. Most folks wouldn't be setting anything that falls under risk profile 1. They'd usually be setting things under risk profile 2, which is more of a production level security.
And everybody needs risk profile 3.
Yeah.
The problem is that no one knows what belongs to which risk profile when they look at the spreadsheet's really dense. All the risk profiles are listed. So what I did was I took that XCCDF, but I don't just output one. I output one for each profile. And then I do the scan for each profile. So what happens here is I'm now looking at failed, not checked, and pass for a run of SCAP, which actually just tells you it failed, it passed, and it wasn't checked. Now the dissystig, which is this, actually has some numbers in here for that, has in it everything. When you run it through SCAP, it'll actually say not checked, not checked, not checked, not checked, not checked, because it's all physical. I didn't like that. I don't want to go in and log into my 4,000 ESXi hosts and say, is this the right value? It'll take me forever. This runs across each host in less than 21 seconds. It's relatively fast. You have a lot more hosts, it'll take a little bit more time. So what we've done was, hey, I want to know what passed, I want to know what failed, and I want to know what's not checked. And then I go off and say, okay, I got these scan results over time. I can tell you that. And these are pretty consistent numbers on this. I'm going to really mess this up. Oh man, that's way too big. Get out of there. There we go. I can tell you the percentage of failure, the percentage of pass, and the percentage of not check. And 10% is the average for this particular run. I want to know what passed, what failed, right? For anybody dealing with DISA, how many people, you probably can't tell me, right? Deal with DISA? Painful, right? This helps with that pain, believe me. So what I want to do is say, hey, these are the hosts that are failing. Come on. We have 5 minutes, so. This is the hosts that have failing things. Why did they fail? So again, it outputs secure ESX, it sends some information. It says, okay, the set shell timeout failed. So the timeout for the shell is not set, or set to the wrong value. Well, that's kind of important. You really want those. So that's an adjustment we have to make. But I can easily go into this and say, okay, what are the ones that aren't checked? I really want to know what those are because, hey, my auditor's after me, right? Everything should be checked. So I can easily just say not checked there. And this is against all profiles. Do another search. And boom, I find out what's not checked. Now this one says enable CHAP auth. That's for iSCSI, folks. If anybody does iSCSI, that's CHAP. This is using vSAN. iSCSI doesn't exist. Why should I check something that doesn't exist? It's an easy check to say, hey, Mr. Auditor, we don't use that. You want proof? Here you go. I can easily give you that. So knowing what's not checked is just as important as knowing what's failed. Now, these other ones are just difficult to check, not impossible. I will eventually add them in. We need to wrap up, apparently. I've been told that. So when you look at the dashboards, it's giving you a lot of dense information about the values. And actually, inside of the security configuration guide are the actual DISA-STIG values, rule numbers. So what I've done here is actually use those instead of the line numbers as the checks. So we're actually reporting on the DISA-STIG for the given profile you've chosen. In this case, it would probably be number 1 if you're on the number DISA-STIG. So which is everything, by the way.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. If there's any last questions, come on up to the microphone. We'll try and answer you. Has this been helpful for you guys so far? Okay, cool. I see nodding heads. That's all that matters. Right? Don't forget your stickers.
And thank you.
All right. So
please remember,
I think we'll wrap up.
Please remember to fill out your surveys. I believe we're doing. Oh, also, there's a hands-on lab.
Oh, yeah.
This is important. 181104 STC. The SOC is actually part of it.
So if you want to play around with this yourself, go take this hands-on lab. You'll see all of a bunch of the stuff that you've seen here, and you can play around with that yourself. Right there up on the screen.
181104 STC on the screen.